Well, I'm at the junction of the fire break, and I believe this has to be 1N12. Whew, that was a crazy descent. It's a nice little flat area here. Nice little flat. Lots of nice oak trees here. But now I'm going to begin my maneuvers going back. So I'm going to be going that way. It looks like I'm going to be going uphill a little bit for a while. This looks like a really peaceful area to relax. Interestingly enough, there's a trail right here, an actual Forest Service trail. It's probably the Santa Ana River Trail, again. Right here. I came from over there, which was an insane fire break. Here, we're at this nice little flat. We've got these beautiful black oaks here, Quercus Calocedrus. Beautiful trees. And some young, looks like a lot of young coulter pines here. Let's go over here for a minute. We've got some Incense-Cedar here, but I can get closer. I think that's a giant sequoia right there, that really narrow pyramid-shaped tree. It's like a giant sequoia. I know they plant them here in Southern California in the mountains quite a bit. See, very similar to the Incense-Cedar from a distance. But yeah, it's definitely a giant sequoia. I could tell by the texture of the foliage. So, if you're ever hiking some random area, you might come across some planted giant sequoias. Possibly some naturalizing giant sequoias. This is a giant sequoia, Sequoiadendron giganteum, and it's closely related to the Incense-Cedar. And when the trees are young, sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. Their bark is similarly colored, kind of a grayish brownish on the Incense-Cedar, Calocedrus decurrens, and kind of grayish on the giant sequoia. However, that's where the similarities generally end. The giant sequoia has sharper, needle-like adult foliage. A lot of plants have juvenile foliage on young shoots and seedling trees, and an adult foliage is what the typical leaves look like that are particular for that species. Well, these are kind of all shaped, and they're sharper, and they go all around the stem on the giant sequoia. The Incense-Cedar, the leaves are scale-like, and the branches are in flattened sprays, like this. This is more of a flattened spray. So this is an Incense-Cedar, Calocedrus decurrens. So those are some ways. As one way is by closely examining the foliage. Another way is to touch the bark. Incense-Cedar bark is hard. It's shreddy, but it's hard. Giant sequoia bark tends to be a little spongier, a slightly spongy texture. See if I can go here without poking my eye out. But it kind of has a slightly foamy texture to it, and you can actually kind of press your finger in just a little bit. Another way is by the cones. Now, surprisingly, in this dry area, this tree has some cones. That's a giant sequoia cone. Pretty decent size. Has what a giant sequoia cone looks like, and then when it browns and dries up, it opens up. The scales open up. Kind of similar to a pine cone. A little bit similar. Here's what they look like when they're open. Incense-Cedars, their cones are much different looking. I don't see any on this tree, so I'll have to just describe it verbally. An Incense-Cedars cones kind of look like, when they're closed, they look like a closed duckbill when they're still green and not opened. And then when they open, they split, two of the scales split open, kind of like this. And then you got a couple, then you got, I think, at least one or two scales in the middle, kind of like my, see my finger wiggling? Kind of like that. I can't make a perfect shape of it, but it's a lot more shaped like that when it opens. So it's like the beak, the duck bill's open, and the duck's tongue is sticking out. Kind of what it looks like when it's open. So that's what an Incense-Cedar seed cone looks like. So when they're young, they're very similar. They're narrow, pyramid shaped. One way you might be able to tell from a little bit of a distance is that giant sequoias are very neatly pyramidal. Very neatly pyramid shaped. Narrow, and sometimes very narrow. Like these guys are fairly narrow, but I've seen them with even a more of a narrow profile than that. So, and the foliage, while it can be quite dense on both trees, the texture of the foliage is lighter. The texture is a little bit lighter and looser looking on the giant sequoia, even though it's fairly dense. In the Incense-Cedar, the foliage texture is a little rougher looking from a distance. So that from a distance is not always a foolproof diagnostic. Getting closer to the trees is a lot better, but it does help to a general extent. Because a lot of times I can spot trees a couple hundred feet away, tell whether it's a giant sequoia or an Incense-Cedar, because I've seen them a lot and know what they look like. So there you have it. Calocedrus decurrens, Incense-Cedar. Giant Sequoia, Sequoiadendron giganteum. Now, time to follow 1N12 back to Angelus Oaks. Then maybe wipe down my scrapes again. But I'm going to be heading back this way, but first I'm going to take a small break and look at some trees over here.